What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Blazers Uprise Live. We got our 2020-2021 season preview. I could just call it the 2021 season. It's barely in 2020. But we're going to touch on all 30 teams for you guys today. Going to just spend a little bit of time on each team. We'll talk about the Blazers and where we think they slot into the Western Conference playoff picture. I don't have, I want to do... I'll either do my standings predictions in a video. I'm still going to try and do that tomorrow. If not, then I'll just do them on Twitter or something. Or I'll do them in an article on the website. I just dropped an article giving my 5 preseason takeaways from the Blazers preseason, talking about like 5 takeaways that I had. Wanted to do a video on it, but just decided to do an article. You can find that over at blazersuprise.com. Other than that, we got the stream today, and Wednesday we will be streaming at 3:30 p.m. This is our last night stream for Blazers Uprise Live, and then we will be switching that over back to the normal time that we haven't done in months. Haven't done in 9 months. That'll be the 3:30 with picks against the spread, all that. Been working on the graphics for that and everything. So I'm excited for the start of basketball because this is the last day outside of the regular season. We got basketball tomorrow that actually matters, that actually counts. So, Eric, how's your day going? Just how's your day going? And how's your day going? Chat, let me know. Yeah. Eric's working hard. If you hear a buzz, like, Eric can't control that or anything. It's just the work office. But yeah, so I'm just excited to actually talk about every team because we haven't really done that. There's a lot of opinions that I have on certain teams that I haven't really, voiced anytime lately. So it'll be cool to actually just get into it. And that'll basically be this entire episode for you guys. Is there anything else you want to touch on during the stream? Maybe we could warm up with it. Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry.
Is that just it?
Yeah. There we go. Appreciate it, Block. So yeah. Eric said he's doing good. I asked him how he's doing. He said he's doing good. There you go. Yeah, we're just going to jump into it. There's not really much of a plan. I've been prepping with a lot of this stuff. I just spent about 45 minutes writing a 1,200 word article. So, yeah, so we're just going to jump straight into this. We'll start with the Eastern Conference. We'll start at the bottom of the barrel. Eric, who do you think is the worst team in the Eastern Conference? There are definitely some candidates for it, but I'm curious who you think is the worst team in the Eastern Conference.
Oh, tough question right off the bat, huh?
Yep.
When you put the question that way, give me just a minute.
Chat, let me know as well. You guys can answer these questions as well. The worst team in the Eastern Conference. Shaggy Squid says Pistons. I think the Pistons have to be up there, especially if Jeremy Grant plays like how he's done this preseason. You got the Cavs, the Knicks, definitely up there.
The Pistons,
down there.
We'll talk about them when we get to them, but they do still have Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin and some vets there. That DeLon Wright, they could be okay. I don't know, Jeremy Grant, yeah, they could be all right. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they could be okay.
You don't really have any true bottom feeders. I feel like the worst teams, like even the Cavs, they got Colin Sexton, who averaged 20 points per game last year. They got Kevin Love. They got Andre Drummond. You know what I mean? That's better than the bottom feeders of the East in years past, so I feel like it's not as obvious. Even the Knicks, they got Obi Toppin, a guy we both love, coming in there. You got, we could just preview all 3 of these teams, the Cavs, Knicks, and Pistons right now, since I feel like they're probably all bottom of the barrel, but even the Knicks have some talent on that team. If RJ Barrett can take a step up, and they signed Nerlens Noel, and honestly, it's kind of hard to remember who's on that roster. It shuffles every year. But you got Mitchell Robinson, you got Obi Toppin there. I think the Knicks are probably the worst team, though. I would probably go with the Knicks as the worst team because they don't have veteran leadership there. And I feel like that will help a bottom feeder win a few games throughout the season, having vets in the locker room. Detroit has that. Cleveland has that even. The Knicks don't really have that, so I'd say they're probably the worst team in the East.
Are you saying Julius Randle is not a vet leader?
Even if he was like 35, he's not the guy you want as a leader, considering the way he plays is, very, very ball dominant, no defense, I mean, I guess you could say the same about Kevin Love in regards to the defense, but yeah, I mean, Julius Randle is not a guy who helps you win basketball games. The Knicks have a lot of players that, I mean, even RJ Barrett last year, he got some hype for what he did last season, but he wasn't that good. He was very inefficient. His defense wasn't good. So they don't really have players that really help you win games. That's kind of the thing with the Knicks. So maybe they could be a surprise team, but I'm not super high on them. I would put the Knicks and the Cavs in the same tier. I honestly wouldn't put Detroit in that tier. I think Detroit is getting slightly underrated. But like bottom tier, I'd put Cleveland and I'd put New York.
Yeah, Detroit, for all they did, with all the weird signings and then stretching a bunch of players and doing that kind of stuff, they did do well in the draft. And they did sign some players that can help them win games. It just wasn't the direction. I definitely would not have gone. I would not have chosen like Jeremy Grant and Mason Plumlee over like Christian Wood. But
yeah.
But stuff like that.
For them, it's like if Blake Griffin can bounce back. I think.
Yeah.
Because he's been hurt, and I mean, like he sucked last year, right? The year before, he was really good, and that's why he was a guy that I was interested in as a Blazer trade target. Now it's like another injury-plagued season. Didn't play well when he wasn't hurt. And his contract's really big. Now it's like, no, I don't even have interest in him. Trade-wise, we can't even really trade for him, given the contracts that we have. But, I mean, like, if he bounces back to what he has before and you got Derrick Rose in there and you got some vets, like, that's a better team than New York and Cleveland, I think.
Yeah. I like Obi Toppin for New York. I just don't like a lot of their roster construction other than that. And I know they tried to fix a little bit of past mistakes this summer, but at the same time, I mean, like guys like Nerlens Noel and Austin Rivers are like quality bench guys for like a fringe playoff team, not like that's not the kind of guys you sign when you're competing for one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah. In my next tier, I want to know if you agree with this. Like the next tier up, we're working our way up here. I think you'd put Detroit in there. You'd put Chicago in there. We've already talked about Detroit. We don't really have to talk about them anymore. But I'd put Detroit in the second tier up. Chicago and probably Charlotte. And honestly, I don't think I'd put any other team in there. Am I missing a team? Like, am I forgetting a team? Do you feel good about those teams there? Or
yeah. I think the Magic might regress a little bit this year. But other than that, I think you pretty much hit the teams in that next year.
Yeah, which one of those teams do you feel like could jump up potentially and maybe actually contend for the 8th and final playoff spot?
I mean, obviously, if LaMelo is good, the Charlotte Hornets could take a step up. They also got Gordon Hayward, which is another puzzling move for them, but it does make them better on paper this year. So they could be a team that, especially if a guy like Cody Zeller stays healthy finally, they were not that far away from being in the bubble. And I think they ended up finishing percentage points ahead of Washington after they lost almost every game in the bubble. So I could definitely see them being in that playoff contention for the 8th seed if LaMelo is as advertised like a lot of people think he is. But I don't know. Overall, I don't think they have enough depth, or especially in the front court, to make the playoffs. But I'd probably put them ahead of the Bulls and what was the other team you said?
Detroit. Detroit, I think, is probably
Detroit.
below those two teams.
Yeah.
Detroit's probably the 13th best team in the conference. I'm actually a little bit intrigued by Chicago, and honestly, I'm intrigued by them every year, and then they suck almost every year, so maybe I need to stop falling for this, but Kobe White has been terrific during the preseason. Like, he's been balling out. He's
had some
looked
good
great.
games towards the end of last year, too.
Yeah, And then you got Zach LaVine there, and you got Markkanen, and you don't have Boylan screwing over Markkanen anymore, so maybe Markkanen kind of takes a step back up. He kind of regressed last year, but Boylan wasn't the right coach for Markkanen. You got Wendell Carter Jr. there. Daniel Gafford's an underrated backup center. He had a good rookie year last season and will be a solid backup center for them. You got Otto Porter Jr. there still, if he can be healthy. You got Satoransky. You have some pieces there. Honestly, I think they could be a little bit above average offensively. Defensively, they're going to be terrible, but I think they could be 10th to 15th range offensively. You look at a guy like Markkanen, and you got LaVine, you got Kobe White. If Kobe White takes that jump, and he's looked great this preseason, you got Otto Porter Jr. there, and you got some solid pieces off the bench as well. You got some offensive talent there, right? Billy Donovan he's not. I don't like him as a coach, but he's better than Boylan. So I don't know. That team's kind of intriguing to me to potentially take a step up.
Yeah, I've never liked the White and LaVine fit. I feel like they both kind of need the ball in their hands to be super effective, and I thought last year they might have taken a step up. They had the pieces to do so. But, they're an interesting team to watch this year. Still don't think they're a playoff team, but definitely in that fringe, just under playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Kobe White might be my new pick for most improved player just based on how good he's looked this preseason, and you got a guy that's that offensively talented that'll get more minutes this season. That's definitely a guy to watch out for that award. Next tier, I have Orlando, Washington, and Atlanta. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I probably put... Oh, that one's tough, actually, between Washington and Atlanta. See, for all of the hate on Westbrook, he is a good regular season player. He can buoy a team into the playoffs. I just don't trust him shooting-wise once you get to the playoffs. But I feel like he can carry that team. That team's pretty loaded, actually, with they got a shooter like Bertans. I know Rui, they just announced he was going to be out a few weeks today.
My God, man, that sucks.
Thomas Bryant's a capable center. They signed Rollo as a backup center. He might even start over Thomas Bryant. I don't know. But Avdia's looked okay in the preseason, looking like he might have some teams might regret not picking him higher than 9th. Mm-hmm. And then, you got Beal and Westbrook. That's a pretty good, solid team.
Troy Brown Jr. kind of broke out a little bit near the end of last season. I don't know. Was Wagner the first guy you mentioned? Because that's a guy I really like. Wagner played well last season. They actually have a pretty deep team.
They're sneaky deep, yeah.
So, I mean, dude, it's tough. But then you look at Atlanta with Trae Young. They got I got, Beal, you got a legit star there. But Trae Young, I'm not sure Beal's better than Trae Young. That's an interesting debate for maybe a different time. But I mean, you got Trae Young, you got John Collins there, and John Collins is basically going to be playing for a max contract. He's going to be motivated, and he's a 20-10 guy and improved his three-point shooting last year. You have Gallinari in there now. You have Clint Capella there. You have Bogdanovich there. You have a guy like DeAndre Hunter who might take a step up. They signed Chris Dunn. They signed Rajon Rondo. I don't know why they signed both those guys. They're kind of similar, defensive point guards that can't shoot, but they signed them both. They have decent depth, and they have you got Gallo off the bench. The backup center could be a Kongwu. I think he's NBA ready for the most part. You got, I don't even know, what is their starting lineup. You got Bogdanovich, I assume, in the starting lineup. Are they going to start him? I haven't really been paying much attention to them this preseason.
I haven't seen their actual official starting lineup yet, but I would assume he'd be starting at the 2.
Yeah. Regardless, they got maybe a top 10 bench. I'm not sure. They got decent players off that bench. You got Trae Young around the ship. That's a sneaky team that could actually make the playoffs as the 8th seed.
Yeah, I think they're being kind of overvalued a little bit just because, you sign a couple free agents, but they weren't really good last year either. So,
yeah,
I don't know. When you have a guy like Trae Young who's so good on offense, so you can't bench him, but Like, he's such a liability. Like, it's worse
Mm-hmm.
than Dame and CJ in their early years, as far as defensively. It just limits a lot of stuff you can do. And then you say, well, that's why we brought in Chris Dunn and Rajon Rondo, but then their offense isn't quite as good if you play those guys. So
Yeah. I mean, they're basically adding, because Clint Capella didn't even play a minute for them after they traded for him at the deadline last season. You're basically adding Clint Capella, Bogdanovich, and Danilo Gallinari. That's and you're also adding Chris Dunn and Rajon Rondo. That's legit. So I don't know. Okay, we've listed 8 teams so far. One of those teams is going to have to make the playoffs. So which one of the teams that we've named so far do you think makes the playoffs? Chat, also let me know. Out of all the teams we've talked about so far, which team do you think makes that presumably 8th seed in the Eastern Conference?
for me, it's Washington. I know a lot
Yeah.
of people are saying Hawks, but
Magic's tough, man. I mean, Magic have made it the 8th seed, what, the last 2 years? Maybe the last 3? They were just kind of constantly there. But not having Jonathan Isaac's going to hurt.
yeah. Did you see they signed him to a 4-year, $80 million extension?
Yeah, 4-year, $80 million extension, man.
Sorry,
I mean,
Tommy,
good for
can't trade
him.
for him now.
Yeah, good for him. Like, with all the injuries he's dealt with, that he still gets paid $20 million a year is kind of insane, given the fact that I don't think he's proven that he's a really, really good player yet. He's proven he's a solid to good player. Like, he's a really, really good defender. Offensively, he has flashes, and he's kind of inconsistent on that end. $20 million is kind of a lot for that, you know? He's still young. You just got to wonder how he looks like coming back off the injury issues he's dealt with. And it's like, he's going to have to take a step up from what he was doing before his injuries in order to justify that contract. So when you're talking about the injuries he's dealt with and him potentially taking a step back once he comes back, like him not quite being the same and having to take some time to kind of get back to where he was, you're talking about a legit jump for him just to justify that contract. And it's not terrible. It's not like Eric Gordon's $18 million, $19 million a year contract, but it could end up being looked at a couple years down the line as a poor contract, or it could be looked at as maybe even a bargain if he develops to his true potential, because he has a really high ceiling in my opinion. I think he could potentially be an all-star at some point just because of what he can do on both ends of the court and his size, fluidity, and whatnot. But yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how that develops. They're definitely going to miss him this year.
You see they paid Fultz too. That was
Did
weird
they?
in my opinion. Yeah, they gave him a 3-year, $50 million.
That's quite a bit of cash. 3-year, $50 million. That's how much a year? Let me do to try and do
It's
some
like
quick.
16.6 something.
Yeah, that's that's a bit of an overpay. But that's kind of like the same boat as Jonathan Isaac. Because, dude, here's the thing. Let me just talk about Markelle Fultz for a second. If he could get his jump shot back to what it was coming out of college, he would be like developing on the. Like, he'd be a little bit behind, but he'd be developing on the curve that I felt like he would develop on. Because you look at everywhere else and everything else he provides, it's what was expected out of him being the number 1 pick. Like, he can slash. He's showcased spurts of defensive ability. He's distributed the ball well. It's just not having that jump shot has limited him. You know, that whole saga is so weird. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if it looks better this preseason or if he can even get it back or what, but
with light in for a sec. With the injuries to Fultz, and just like the weirdness of the situation, he's one of those guys where I can't see a team like giving him a max contract, or like even if he plays well this year, it'd be hard to trust him. That's one of the reasons why I feel like we still have an outside shot when it comes to the Blazers of keeping a guy like Harry Giles, because even if he plays well in the limited minutes he has, it's going to be hard for a team to trust his injury history enough to offer him like 15, 20 million a year. So when you have a guy like Fultz there's another guy who signed today. I forgot who it was. But I thought the same way with, I'll probably remember when we talk about their team. But either they're not going to live up to that contract and it's going to be horrible, or you got him for about what you would have paid to keep him if he does well this season. So it doesn't really make sense to me that a lot of these non-max level type guys are signing these deals that are a little on the expensive side, because it's either going to be a bad contract or it's like what you would have paid for him if you just kept him as a restricted free agent. So like I don't really know what some of these teams are doing, but
yeah. I mean,
and then it kind of locks a lot of these guys in from being traded. That a lot of these guys that signed today were on, or like the trade block or whatever, theoretical trade block. And now it's going to be pretty hard to trade a lot of them during the season this year. But
yeah, here's the thing: if like with Orlando giving Fultz that contract, if you're going to give him that type of money when he hasn't really shown that he deserves it, like I would be, if I was Orlando, if I'm going to pay him that much money over 3 years, I would be trying to get that 4th-year contract as a team option. Whereas if he does pan out and is worth that contract, you can lock him into a 4th year, because honestly, it's like this contract seems so favorable to Markelle Fultz that I feel like Orlando probably could have gotten a 4th-year team option out of it potentially. I'm not sure. Obviously, I don't know the negotiations with that, but you're talking about a guy who last season wasn't efficient. And that comes down to the 3-point shot mostly, but wasn't efficient, like in average 12 points per game and 5 assists. That's quite a... Could they... No, because this is his 4th year, so they probably couldn't have given him that 4th-year team option, could they? Can you extend a 4-year contract right now if the player is going to the last year of their rookie deal? Mr. Cap Guru.
Yeah, you could do a 5-year extension, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I know there's weird rules around extensions and whatnot.
Because Luke Kennard was the guy I was thinking of. Thanks, chat. So he, I think his last year was only like partially guaranteed. He signed a 4-year, $64 million contract. And he's the other guy. So like that's $16 million a year. And so like if Luke Kennard plays as well as he could possibly play this year, I think he's like a $16 million a year player. So like, once again, that's a contract that you now have Marcus Morris and Luke Kennard locked up on similar deals that completely kill your cap situation. And I don't think those guys are good enough to like be the answer to all their problems and stuff like that. So it's just a little weird that all these contracts being handed out today.
Yeah, I mean, if Fultz could become a 35% 3-point shooter, he would have a chance of being an all-star. His 2-point percentage was up to 51% last year. His free throw percentage went up from 57% the year before to 73% last year. So that's kind of like a hopeful sign. You hope his 3-point shooting is just kind of a little bit behind that and will catch up, because 2 seasons ago, he shot a little bit less than a 3 game, shot 29%. Last season, he shot 2 threes per game in 27.7 minutes per game, but only shot 27% on those threes. So, like, that's the thing, is it would open up the rest of his game a little bit more. He would be a more complete offensive threat. He relied heavily on his pull-up jumper. His pull-up jumper was great at the University of Washington and was just an all-around complete offensive player. And now that he's missing that 3-point shot, it limits, some of his other strengths, his slashing ability, whatnot. But he's still able to get downhill, even though he doesn't really have a respectable jumper. He's still able to get into the lane and utilize some of his athleticism and kind of shiftiness to be able to get downhill and collapse the defense. It's just like, man, I hope he develops that 3-point shot, because I still think he has all-star potential if he can just get his shot back to what it was coming into the league. Man, I don't know. I want to see him succeed as a University of Washington guy. I know Chap might start hating on me a little bit,
but see, and just to clarify, I'm not saying that Fultz can't earn that, is not going to be good or anything like that. I'm just curious why teams are like taking that chance, because like, let's say he regresses or has a season like last year where he averages 12 and 5 and doesn't shoot above 30% 3 like you're hoping he does, then like he's massively overpaid. It's almost $17 million a year. But yeah. So hopefully he can come around and do that. Because the Magic are kind of locking themselves into a lot of these guys now, between Isaac, Vucevic, and now Fultz.
Yep. Here comes the hard part We got 7 teams left. How are you going to tier the play? I'm going to have you tier these because I don't know how to tier these, right? Let me just list off the teams that we have left in no particular order. We got Milwaukee, Indiana, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Boston, Toronto, and what team am I forgetting? Who am I forgetting?
Oh, did you say Miami?
And Miami. Yeah, I forgot Miami, the defending Eastern Conference champs. Yeah, so that's the 7 teams left. How do you tier those teams? Because that's tough, man. You got a lot of question marks at the top of the conference.
Yeah, so other than the Bucks, I think a team might, challenge them for the number 1 seed, especially a team like Brooklyn if they're healthy. But I could also see Brooklyn not having a great regular season, but be better positioned for the playoffs. So I'd probably put Milwaukee in a tier by themselves, just based on the last couple of years, them easily winning the first seed. And then the other teams, I could see any of them being 2 through 7. So like if you're going to ask me to tier them, I would tier them Milwaukee, and then all the other 6 teams 2 through 7.
Okay. How about I'll put you on the spot with all this. Rank them 1 through 7 for the regular season. How would you rank them? Chat, also let me know because I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. I am reading your guys' comments. I'm just not replying. We're going through this. I am curious as to how people would rank them, especially Eric. What you got?
Here's the tough part for me. A team like the Raptors, who I'm extremely high on their coaching. Their roster did take a hit losing Ibaka and Gasol, but they still have a lot of talent on their roster. But their big man depth isn't quite as good as it was the last couple of years. So they might naturally take a step back, even though I still really like them. So they might be closer to that 7th spot.
Mm-hmm.
The Pacers have a lot of questions, like Oladipo and team fit, chemistry, all that kind of stuff. So despite me really liking them as well, I'd probably put them 6th. And then I really like what Philadelphia did, finally getting a shooter like Seth Curry. I feel like he's a good fit. And of course this could all change if a team trades for Harden, but I'd probably put them 5th.
That's who I have 5 through 7.
I'm gonna put Brooklyn 4th,
Okay.
because I don't know. Kyrie hasn't been healthy a lot. KD is coming off an injury. I feel like they're just gonna want to play out the regular season to make the playoffs. And I'm not saying they're like the 4th best team, because they're not on paper. They're probably right up there with the Bucks if everyone's healthy. But yeah. I feel like they're going to, as long as they're in the playoffs, they're going to care more about making sure their lineup is good for the playoffs rather than trying to get the 3rd seed instead of the 4th seed or something like that.
I will say this, they do have a lot of depth, though. So, if Kyrie misses a game, you put in Spencer Dinwiddie in there, you know what I mean? And, Karis LeVert gets more touches, gets some of Kyrie's touches, and if he, continues to kind of develop, they do have the pieces to still win regular season games, even with resting KD or Kyrie. So, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But, yeah, I generally have the same sort of feel you do.
Probably put the Celtics 3rd then. And then the Heat 2nd.
And Milwaukee 1st. Yeah, that's basically what I have. I have Milwaukee, Miami. I have Brooklyn 3rd, Boston 4th. Boston losing Gordon Hayward is a little bit of a hit, but maybe that allows Jaylen Brown to grow a little bit. You know what I mean? I feel like that is probably the consensus top 4. I got Philadelphia 5. I also like what they've done. I think they could potentially be as high as 2 behind Milwaukee. I mean, you got Simmons and Embiid. The problem was you didn't have players that fit around them. Now you have a ton of shooting, as well as underrated defenders, and guys like Seth Curry and Danny Green can still defend. And you got rid of the Horford experiment. Putting Tobias Harris back at the 4 is good. So I really like what they've done. Shake Milton has come along quite nicely. He was one of my favorite second round sleepers in the draft a couple years back, and he's panning out pretty well. Let me just pat my own back, as if I've never missed a draft pick. Everybody thinks I'm gonna miss LaMelo this year.
Wasn't he terrible in the draft in the bubble though?
Milton, yeah, I mean he might have been. I don't remember honestly, but that's a guy who can kind of do it all offensively, play off the ball, play on the ball, create shots and whatnot. So he's a good bench fit. Maybe he starts. I assume they're gonna start Simmons at the 1, Curry at the 2, Danny Green at the 3. Defensively it works out where Curry guards the 1, Danny Green guards the 2, and then Simmons can guard the 3. And then you got Harris and Embiid, and then you got Shake Milton off the bench, Thibault off the bench, another good defender. They got Dwight Howard as the backup center. Maybe I'm missing a piece. They still got Mike Scott there, so that's a solid team. At 5, I feel like that's kind of underrated, and we haven't even gotten into Toronto.
Yeah.
The middle part of this conference, 4 through 7 is better than I've maybe ever seen it. It's very, very deep.
Like Sherman says, East stacked low key.
Yeah, it's
this is as talented as the East is about. There we go.
Okay, cool. But yeah, Toronto I have 6, Indiana I have 7th. You could flip them. Toronto losing Ibaka, and I don't know. I feel like that's too low for them. They could be as high as 2 because they're really well coached, and they still got Siakam. You still got Lowry. He might take a step back. He's up there in age. But Norman Powell, honestly, might be the most underrated player in the NBA. He was terrific last year. He's a good defender. Let me just look up his stats because I want to talk about him. Because
they re-signed Van Vliet as well.
Yeah.
And OG, they got on a steal of a contract, and he was kind of in the same realm as all those other guys that signed today, and I felt like that was really good value for him because I think he's going to take a big step up this year.
And he could be a breakout guy. So that's the thing. They could be as high as 2. Any of the teams 2 through 6 that I have, I feel like could be as high as 2. Right? It's just kind of the way it is. So it's hard to even separate them tier-wise. But, dude, Norman Powell, I think, might be the most underrated, at least the most underrated guard in the NBA. Last season, he played 28 minutes a game and averaged 16 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He shot 57.5% from two-pointers. Inside the arc, 57.5%. Terrific finisher. From the three-point line, he shot 39.9%. He had a true shooting percentage last year of 62.4%. That's extremely efficient from basically every area of the floor. Per 36, he's averaging 20 a game. He only played 28 minutes per game to get those 16 points, but on a per 36-minute basis, that's 20 points per game. He is so underrated, I think. He broke out last year, and I feel like not many people were really talking about him because it kind of got overshadowed by Siakam taking another step up, and he's, you got a lot of other talent on that team, Fred VanVleet, and his contract year coming up. I feel like Norman Powell got overlooked, and he's one of the most underrated players in the league.
Yeah, I think sometimes he's a little inconsistent is my only issue with Powell is... he'll have a great game, and then you're like, okay, here's Norman Powell, one of the most underrated players, and then he'll, stink it up for a couple games. So it's more his stats to me are a lot of really good games and really bad games and not much in between consistency-wise. So I'd hope that, especially, maybe I'm just, overvaluing the playoffs in that regard, because... he has had some really good games in the playoffs and then some really, really big clunkers. But
I just don't know if you're that inconsistent how you shoot such good numbers, though. You know what I mean? That's the thing.
It's true, but like I said, if you have good games and bad games, it kind of cancels each other out. But they definitely need his scoring this year. It might not matter, but if you're playing guys like Boucher, who's really good defensively, but not nearly as good offensively as Ibaka. I mean, he's not even in the same universe as Ibaka and Gasol on the offensive end, so someone's going to have to pick up the because Gasol, for all his like aging and he could barely move up and down the court last year. He is really good at moving the offense and running sets, and like he's just really smart. So you got to somehow replace that with a little more ISO scoring or a little more creative sets and stuff. So Powell's going to have to pick up a little bit of that.
Yeah, I just think you look at his season last year, you could make the argument that he's about at CJ's level. If you just look at the stats that he put up last season, I'm not necessarily making that argument myself, but you're talking about a guy who's more efficient from basically every area of the floor than CJ, gets the line a little bit more, defends far better than CJ, scores at almost the same rate. Like, I feel like people just like, oh, he's just a bench guy. He's a legit NBA starter. I don't think he's better than CJ, but if you just look at things statistically, you could kind of put him in the same realm, which is, I know Blazer fans might not agree with that. Or they'll say, oh, he's better than CJ. CJ's awful. It's either one or the other. But I feel like you could put him in the same realm, and I could see how somebody could justify that.
To me, I think he would struggle if he was the second option on a team like CJ is. I think his efficiency would go down a little bit.
He was like the fourth option. I don't know. They had a lot of scoring options there. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, maybe in that role, yeah, that's the counter argument you could make. I'm just saying, like, he is a good NBA starter in my opinion. I feel like not many people look at him like that. So he's a guy I really like on Toronto. So it's like you still got him. You got Van Fleet. You got Siakam, you got Lowry, you got OG. Like, that's still a ton of talent, and you got Nick Nurse as the coach. They could be the 2 seed. I have them as 6. I feel like it's way too low, but any other team above them that I put at 6, I would also feel that's way too low. So that's the struggle this year, is they're really deep Eastern Conference. Who do you think makes it out of the Eastern Conference to the NBA Finals, just assuming, teams are healthy?
If they're healthy, it's probably going to be the Nets.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think they're a little more set up for the playoffs. They're good enough to not get bullied by a team like the Heat, the way the Bucks could possibly again this year. The Bucks may have solved a little bit of that getting Drew Holiday, but at the same time, I mean, Bledsoe, it's not like he is a crappy defender either. So, Chief, and I do hate Kyrie. I'm sorry. I don't know why you think it's unjustified.
Is he still talking about that? He's said that, like, he's brought up Kyrie so many times so far this stream. At least it's finally relevant. But, yeah, I mean, bro, Kyrie's always hurt. KD had that injury, I mean, if they could easily get hurt. But, it's kind of hard to predict injuries, and you're not really supposed to predict injuries, right? So, it's a definite concern. I feel like it'll be... I mean, Miami could go on another run, but I feel like teams will take them a little bit more seriously in this year's playoffs than they did last year. Milwaukee, of course, could make it out, but I want to touch on them because they took a step back, in my opinion. I would probably lean Brooklyn as well. And part of the reason is I think Milwaukee took a step back. They struggled in the playoffs last year, and I don't think this year's roster is as talented as last year's. The Bogdanovich fiasco really kind of screwed them over. They gave up a ton for Drew Holiday. Defensively, their starting lineup should be maybe even better, right? Mm-hmm. You got the starting lineup, projected starting lineup, you got Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez in there. And who's the 5th guy? I feel like I'm forgetting someone.
I think DiVincenzo might start at the 2.
Yeah, and DiVincenzo is a good defender. He is a good defender. He's underrated on that end of the floor. So you got 5 good defenders there. Drew Holiday is a great guard defender. He replaces Eric Bledsoe. Drew Holiday's a little better offensively than Bledsoe, and definitely better defensively. Bledsoe's a good defender, but Drew Holiday is phenomenal. So, like, their starting lineup, I think, is a little bit better. The problem is they don't have anywhere near the depth they did last season. They lost George Hill, who was great for them last year. super efficient, shot like 46% from three. They lost Ersan Ilyasova. I think that's an underrated loss. He was a solid role player for them. They've had him like 3 times. Maybe they'll somehow bring him back a fourth time. They've had he seems like he's always going in and out of Milwaukee. He is there, Steve Blake. They lost him. They lost Robin Lopez, who was a solid backup center. And I think I'm forgetting a wing that they lost. They lost Wesley Matthews as well. So they lost some pieces off that team, and they replaced them with Bobby Portis, whose game I don't like whatsoever. He doesn't play defense. He isn't efficient. He is not a guy that really helps you win games, especially in the playoffs, in my opinion. I don't even know if he's ever played in the playoffs because, he's only played for Chicago and was in Washington, in New York, been a guy on bottom feeders. But, he's one of those guys that shoots under 50% inside the arc. Not good for a big. Doesn't get to the line. Like, I don't know. I've never liked his game. And who else did they replace those bench pieces with? Because I'm kind of blanking right now on their roster.
They got Torrey Craig.
Eh.
DJ Augustine, backup point guard. They retained.
He was awful last year, yeah.
Pat Connaughton. They got Bryn Forbes. They got your boy Sam Merrill.
I mean, see, like that bench is downgraded.
Yeah.
It's vastly downgraded.
Yeah, so when they made the trade for Drew Holiday, it kind of capped what they could do.
Who's their backup center?
Well, I think Giannis is going to play some center this year, but right now it's listed as either Bobby Portis or DJ Wilson. So that's
I mean, I don't like either of those guys. Like Portis is a little bit more of a four in my opinion, just the way he plays. I don't know. I don't like a lot of those bench pieces. Like there's some okay bench pieces in there, but nowhere near as good of a bench as they had last season. So their starting lineup's slightly better. Their bench is noticeably worse. So I think that's a slight downgrade, a little bit of a step back. And if they deal with an injury, it's going to be far tougher for them to recover, if Drew Holiday gets hurt, or if Chris Middleton gets hurt, or if Giannis gets hurt, they're screwed no matter if it was last year or this year. But if Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday gets hurt, they don't really have a guy like a George Hill can step up and play great basketball and has playoff experience, a decade of playoff experience. He's been around for a while. You don't have a Wesley Matthews there. You don't have an Ersan Ilyasova there who can step in. And he's not like a guy like Ilyasova isn't a guy who wows you, but he's a guy he's like a glue guy that fits in, can shoot the three, can defend, and just fits in well. You look at a lot of their bench pieces like Bryn Forbes, poor defender. Bobby Portis, poor defender. I mean, Pat Connaughton, a little bit better, but I wouldn't say he's good necessarily. G.J. Augustine is a poor defender in my opinion.
He's okay, he's just too short.
Yeah, he's not as good of a defender as George Hill. So that's the thing. I don't know. I think they took a slight step back.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They do. Torrey Craig's a decent defender. That's the only one I'd say to counter that. But I mean, he's not good offensively, though, so it kind of...
Yeah, and they don't really have the means to upgrade the roster either.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, unless they get, 3 or 4 good pieces for, trading a Middleton, but then their top end isn't as good if they're healthy. So, I agree with you. I think Giannis is still good enough if he's healthy to overcome a lot of that and get them the number 1 seed in the regular season like they have been. But I find it hard to believe that they make it. This is the year they make it out of the East.
Yeah, I agree with that.
One thing real quick. So the NBA did take away a 2nd round pick from them as part of their...
We told you guys they were breaking the rules with that right when it broke. That didn't make any sense.
So it came out today that they basically told them that they weren't allowed to go after Bogdanovich. So that's why even after it could have maybe possibly gotten talked about again, the NBA basically told them, no, you're not going to be signing him or trading for him. So that kind of screwed their plans. But I mean, it's their own fault for breaking the rules. So, yeah.
Yep. Let's move on to the Western Conference, all right? Bottom tier of teams. Who would you slot in there? I got 3 on the top of my head, but I'm curious as to who you would put in your bottom tier.
So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that San Antonio is going to be down there. And the funny thing is, there's like these teams aren't that bad. But I would put Sacramento down there as well. And the Timberwolves are definitely down there. I could see them putting some things together. I just don't like the way their roster is constructed as a whole. So those are probably my bottom 3 teams.
You are forgetting OKC.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no. Okay, so they're the worst. They're the worst.
Here's actually what I have. I have OKC at a bottom tier by themselves. Their roster is terrible.
Completely missed them.
Yeah, and I was debating having Minnesota down there with them, but the next tier up, I have Sacramento, Minnesota, and San Antonio. I think San Antonio has the potential to maybe be. I think San Antonio is better than those teams. They're better coached. I think they have probably the best, maybe not the best roster. I don't know. San Antonio's tough going into the season. They got some young guys that could break out. They still got DeRozan, Aldridge, Derek White, Patty Mills. Jakob Poeltl is an underrated guy. Like, they do have some pieces there. They didn't do anything this offseason. Like, either get better or get worse. And they didn't do either of them. Like, get better by, going out and maybe taking a flyer on like a Christian Wood who fits your timeline or something, or, do something, but they didn't really do anything. They got guys like Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker, who could break out, I guess, to like help raise their ceiling, but it's probably not going to be getting them into the playoffs or anything. Probably won't even get them into the play-in. So other than that, they should have probably just, I don't know, like, if you're not going to get your roster good enough to make the playoffs, what's the point in even keeping DeRozan around? Because I highly doubt they're going to get value for him at the trade deadline if they couldn't get value for him this offseason. Like, at that point, just waive him and become worse and get a better draft pick. Like, I don't understand the purpose of keeping him around.
Well, I think they're going to try to still move him. Obviously, if you waive him, then you can't trade him at all. But a lot of these teams, I mean, he's not a good fit on the Bucks, but just using them for an example, they signed a bunch of guys like Bobby Portis and DJ Augustine, and there'll be teams like that can maybe package 3 guys together that they signed, and if it doesn't work out, they could be like, oh, let's combine all these guys for a DeRozan and something like that. So I think they tried to get rid of Aldridge and DeRozan this offseason, but no,
it just seems like it's been a long time
for those
coming.
guys.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, man. I don't know, like, but they're only going to get a second-round pick back or 2 for DeRozan on top of, like, some salary filler. I don't think they're going to get back much because he is a good player, but he's a terrible fit on most contending teams because he's a ball-dominant player that's not quite good enough to justify giving him the ball as much as he needs to be truly effective outside of a lottery team like San Antonio, So that's the issue with him, especially in the playoffs. His game doesn't translate well to the playoffs. Like, there's a reason why Toronto traded him, with how loyal he was to Toronto and how much he loved the city and all that. There's a reason why they traded him, and I don't know. I mean, we'll see what they do, but yeah, I have them Sacramento, Minnesota, 12th through 14th. 11th, next tier. I'm trying to think here. I feel like I'm probably forgetting a team. I should probably just type them all out right
now. Did you say the Kings?
Yeah, the Kings. Yeah, the 12th through 15th. They're not in this room. All right, I think I don't know what's happening right now. I'm hardwired, guys, by the way. I'm hardwired straight to the router, so I don't know what the issue is. And my call with Eric doesn't hiccup or anything, but for some reason the stream does. So it's, good old classic Uprise lag, man. I hate it, but so next tier.
I put Memphis easily at 11th. 1, Jaren Jackson is supposed to be out for at least a month. 2, I feel like are being a little overvalued. I think they're going to have a little bit of a regression. It's not necessarily because they're a worse team, just they did so